Some women don't hide their darkness. They carry it like a velvet cloak, unafraid of its weight, its mystery. And in that shadow, they become unforgettable, not for their light, but for the depths they dare to reveal. She was such a woman, her presence a quiet challenge to the world, her eyes holding secrets she never spoke. He was drawn to her, not because she was perfect, but because her darkness called to the parts of him he could not face. In her he saw the shadow side of desire, the pull of the unknown that both terrified and enthralled him. She moved through the world with a quiet intensity, her steps deliberate, her silence heavy with meaning. In Jungian terms, she embodied the anima, the feminine archetype that stirs the unconscious, a projection of his deepest yearnings and fears. He saw her as a mystery, a woman who seemed to hold the key to something he couldn't name. But what he didn't see was his own shadow, the unacknowledged parts of his psyche, his doubts, his wounds, his hunger for control reflected in her gaze. She wasn't trying to captivate him. She was simply being. Yet her authenticity, her refusal to conceal her complexities, became the spark that set his soul ablaze. The first shift came when he tried to define her. He wanted her to be soft, predictable, amused to soothe his ego, but she was no one's savior. Her darkness, her anger, her grief, her untamed edges wasn't something she apologized for. Trauma psychology teaches us that those who have walked through pain learn to embrace their shadows, not to hide them. She had faced her own abyss, had danced with the parts of herself that others called broken. In that dance, she found strength, a stoic resolve to accept her whole self without shame. Her refusal to shrink for him was both her rebellion and her redemption. His desire deepened, but it was laced with unease. Why couldn't he pin her down? Why did her silences feel like a mirror he wasn't ready to face? Jung would call this projection. He saw in her the parts of himself he'd buried, the vulnerabilities he'd locked away. Her darkness wasn't a flaw. It was a portal to his own unclaimed truths. He reached for her, not to love her fully, but to possess the mystery she represented. He sent messages, sought her attention, tried to pull her into his orbit. But she stood firm, her energy grounded in the quiet power of self-possession. You, watching this, have you ever felt the weight of someone's gaze, demanding you become their light while ignoring your shadows? Pause. Feel the pull of that expectation. Now imagine embracing your darkness instead, the raw, unfiltered parts of you that scare others but make you whole. What would happen if you let those parts breathe? She did. She stopped performing, stopped softening her edges to make others comfortable. And in that choice, she became magnetic, not because she sought his desire, but because she honored her own truth. The second turning point was her withdrawal. Not out of spite, but from a deep knowing. Stoicism speaks of releasing what cannot be controlled, of finding peace in the surrender to what is. She didn't need his validation to feel whole. She was walking the path of individuation, integrating her light and shadow into a self that no longer needed external approval. Her silence wasn't rejection. It was a boundary, a sacred line, drawn to protect her inner world. He felt the loss of her attention like a wound, his ego rattled by her refusal to be his mirror. His obsession grew in the spaces she left empty. He replayed their moments, searching for the key to her heart, not realizing it was her refusal to be captured that held him captive. Her darkness, the parts of her that didn't bend, didn't explain, didn't apologize, became the flame. He couldn't resist. In Jungian terms, he was chasing his own shadow, projected onto her. He saw in her the strength he lacked, the courage to face what he could not. Her power lay not in her perfection, but in her willingness to stand in her truth, unyielding and unafraid. The final shift came when she turned inward. She wasn't running from him. She was returning to herself. She saw the girl who once sought love through pleasing others, who hid her darkness to be palatable. She held that girl, forgave her, and set her free. In that act, she became whole, not flawless, but fiercely authentic. Her detachment was her liberation, a quiet rebellion against a world that demanded she shrink. And in that wholeness, she became untouchable, a woman who didn't need to be understood to know her worth. You, standing at the crossroads of your own story, what if you stopped hiding your shadows? What if you let your darkness be seen, not as a flaw, but as a fire that makes you undeniable? The world may tremble at your truth, but those who fear your depth are not meant to hold you. She became his obsession because she dared to be whole, shadow and all. Her darkness wasn't a burden, it was her power. The woman who embraces her shadows doesn't fade, she burns brighter than the stars.